The air inside the grocery store felt heavy that day. It's a kind of quiet tension that lingered between rushed footsteps and muffled voices. People were just trying to get through their errands, but something about the atmosphere felt off. At the customer service counter stood an elderly black woman, thin yet dignified, with silver hair wrapped neatly in a scarf. She waited patiently, holding a receipt in her weathered hands. Her back straight, despite the long years carved into her bones. She spoke softly, asking for a refund on an item that had spoiled before its expiration date. Instead of being treated with respect, she was met with hostility. The manager, a tall man with arrogance dripping from his tone, looked at her as though she were beneath him. What began as indifference quickly escalated into cruelty. His voice grew sharp, words like knives cutting through the air. Until, in one shocking, unprovoked moment, his hand struck her across the face. Gasps echoed through the store. Time seemed to freeze as the sound of the slap rang louder than any cash register or beeping scanner. The old woman didn't cry, didn't stumble back. She simply stood taller, Tay's eyes burning with a fire that no one had expected. Asterisk whispers began spreading through the aisles. Disbelief painted across every shopper's face. Some froze, others pulled out their phones, recording the scene as though history was being written right before their eyes. The manager smirked, a cruel satisfaction resting on his lips, as if convinced his position gave him the right to demean and humiliate. Yet the woman remained calm, to calm her silence louder than any outburst. She touched her cheek where the slap had landed, her hand trembling not with weakness but with restrained fury. Then she looked at him, her gaze unwavering, piercing through his arrogance. In that moment, it became clear that she was not an ordinary customer. The store's fluorescent lights flickered slightly as she spoke with a voice both steady and commanding, a voice that carried generations of pain and resilience. "You've made the worst mistake of your life," she said. Low enough to chill the air, yet loud enough for every witness to hear. The smirk slipped from the manager's face, confusion breaking through his mask of dominance. Something in her tone hinted at power, not the kind bought with money or titles, but the kind forged through endurance, justice, and unyielding dignity. Within minutes, the store began to change. Phones buzzed, messages spread like wildfire, and people whispered her name as if it carried weight they had forgotten. Some recognized her, not as a frail elderly woman, but as a respected community leader. An advocate who had once marched in protests, stood against injustice, and had a reputation for never backing down. She had built schools, fought systemic abuse, and challenged institutions that tried to erase voices like hers. She had not come to this store as just a customer. She had walked in with the quiet authority of someone who could move mountains with a single word. The employees, who had long suffered under abusive management, suddenly looked at her with hope. They had endured years of mistreatment, silent tears behind break-room doors, and endless cycles of fear. But now, the strike of that man's hand had unlocked something far greater than humiliation. It had sparked revolution. With her presence, the elderly woman became more than a victim. She became a force. An undeniable storm that was about to sweep through every corner of that building. The manager tried to regain control, barking orders at his staff, yelling for someone to call security. But the employees hesitated, glancing at one another, their loyalty suddenly shifting. They didn't move, didn't obey. Instead, they stepped back, leaving him exposed and alone under the harsh lights. Customers circled closer, phones raised, capturing every second. The woman's silence spoke volumes until she finally broke it with chilling clarity. "You will not stand over me. Not today. Not ever again." Her words carried the weight of every black woman who had been silenced, dismissed, and disrespected. The manager tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked under the pressure. He knew the cameras were rolling. He knew his downfall had already begun. Still, he underestimated her, dismissing her as nothing more than a loud voice with no real authority. But what he didn't know was that the woman he struck had the power to strip away everything he thought untouchable. Asterisk. 2 minutes after his hand struck her, the store phone rang. It was for her. The employees, unsure at first, handed it to her with trembling hands. She answered calmly, her voice steady, as though she had been expecting this moment. On the other end were members of the corporate board, who had already seen the viral footage flooding social media in real time. Her influence had reached far beyond the store walls, stretching into offices where power truly sat. She spoke only a few words, her tone sharp and unyielding. And when she handed the phone back, the color drained from the manager's face. Corporate had ordered an immediate investigation, suspending him and every member of his management team. The employees stared in awe as she turned and addressed them directly. "You are free from them," she said. And just like that, it was done. The entire management staff was fired on the spot. Their reign of cruelty shattered in a matter of minutes. Asterisk. The shift in atmosphere was electric. A wave of liberation that rushed through the aisles. Employees who had been too afraid to speak now wept openly, hugging one another, their chains of fear broken. Customers cheered, clapping, chanting her name, their voices echoing like thunder. The once oppressive space transformed into a place of hope, the kind of moment people tell their children about. A living testament to the strength of a single woman's courage. The elderly woman stood in the center of it all, her hands folded before her, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. Her eyes glistened, but not from pain. They shone with triumph, with the knowledge that justice had been delivered swiftly and undeniably. She hadn't needed fists, nor fury, only truth and power, the kind of power that could not be stripped away. Asterisk. Disgraced manager attempted one last, desperate act. Demanding the crowd see reason, insisting he was the real victim. But no one listened. His words fell like dust, meaningless in the storm of truth that surrounded him. Police arrived, but even they hesitated, unsure of how to proceed as dozens of witnesses showed them recordings of his actions. The officers, usually quick to dismiss complaints, found themselves facing undeniable evidence. The woman stood silently as they let him out, his protests drowned by the chorus of voices demanding accountability. For the first time in years, the employees of that store saw the chains of fear dissolve. They weren't just watching justice, they were living it. And at the center of it all stood the elderly woman, a symbol of unbreakable resilience. Asterisk. In the days that followed, the story spread far beyond the walls of the grocery store. News outlets covered it, headlines lit up screens, and people across the nation spoke her name with reverence. She became a symbol not just for her community, but for every worker, every marginalized voice that had been silenced. The footage of that slap and its aftermath became more than a viral moment. It became a movement. She received invitations to speak at schools, churches, and rallies, her story igniting change wherever it was told. The fired management staff faded into obscurity, remembered only as the oppressors who underestimated the strength of one elderly black woman. And the store itself, under new leadership, transformed into a place where employees were respected and valued. A living reminder that justice could rise even in the most unlikely places. Asterisk. But for her, it was never about fame or recognition. When asked why she didn't fight back with her hands, she simply said, "Because justice is not in the slap, is in what follows." Her words carried across generations, becoming a mantra for those who had endured abuse and oppression. She had turned pain into power, humiliation into history. And though she bore the mark of that slap for days, it became a scar of triumph rather than defeat. Every wrinkle on her face, every line of struggle and survival became proof of her strength. She had walked into that store as a customer, but she left as a legend. One whose story would echo for years to come. Asterisk. And so, Her story is not just about what was taken from her, but about what she gave back: courage, justice, and the undeniable truth that dignity cannot be slapped away. Her legacy reminds us that power does not always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, then changes everything in a matter of minutes. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to Moonlight Stories for more powerful stories that deserve to be heard. Asterisk.